So first off, I want to talk about all of the things that we'll need to play the clarinet, the equipment. And below you'll see a PDF handout of all the equipment you'll need. So here we have a mouthpiece. It's going to look like this, something like this. And this is the ligature. Your ligature may be silver and may have the screws on the other side. The rule of thumb is that the screws will always be tightened with your right hand. So if it looks like this, then you put the screws on this side. If it's like this is called inverted, you put the screws on that side. And then we have barrels, which probably will look something like this. The upper joint of the clarinet, the lower joint, and the bell. I have two clarinets in my case because one's an A clarinet used for orchestra playing, and you most likely have a B flat clarinet. The other things that you'll need are reeds to put on the instrument, something like this. This is your reeds. They come in boxes. I recommend the Van Doren traditional. They come in a blue box, probably a size 2.5 or maybe 2 to get started, depending on your mouthpiece, which we'll talk about more later. And then some kind of reed case. This one would be really great for starting. What you want is something that holds the reeds roughly flat and something that you can have multiple of. I recommend at least 4, so you can constantly be rotating your reeds. Great. So now that we have seen all the parts of the clarinet, now we actually want to put it together. So I always start with taking a reed out and then putting that in my mouth to soak. I won't do that while I'm talking, but you soak your reed. Next, I start from the mouthpiece down. Some people start from the bell down. It doesn't really matter either way, but you take your mouthpiece and put it in the end of the barrel that it fits in. Then you put the upper joint into that, making sure that you don't squeeze the keys too much. I try to sort of cover the holes when I put it together, and then just gently put it together. If it feels really tight and you're having a hard time pushing it together, hopefully you'll have some cork grease also. So the cork grease is exactly that. You put a little bit on the cork of the instrument, and then I like to rub it around so that it's evenly applied. When you first get an instrument, you'll probably want to put a decent amount of cork grease on it every time that you use it for maybe the first couple weeks. Now the next part is important, putting the upper joint and the lower joint together. As you can see, there is this little key right here that moves when you press the keys, and you want to have that up, so push these keys down on your left hand and the upper joint, left hand upper joint keys down, so they slide and pass over this key down here. So this is called the bridge key. So you want it to be up so that they're not smashing into each other. So don't press your right hand keys when you're putting the upper and lower joint together. Do press the upper or left hand keys down while you're doing that. Then lastly, the bell is really easy again. Don't squeeze any keys, just put the bell on. Now we put the reed on. So your reed should be nice and wet because you've been soaking it in your mouth this whole time. You want your reed to be really nice and wet so it'll be flexible to vibrate. Now when we put this on the tip, you see how this flat side of the reed, called the table, lines up also with the table of the mouthpiece. So flat side to flat side, and then this tip shape sort of matches too. So you can get those lined up. You basically want it to be more or less aligned. If you feel that you're having any issues, if it feels really hard to play, you might want to try moving that tip down a tiny bit. If it feels really light, you might want to try moving the tip up a little bit. So once you have it on, it should look something like this. And from this side. Not too much peeking over, if any at all. Good. So that's how we put the instrument together. Now taking the instrument apart, The reed and the tip of the reed are very fragile, so you never want to manhandle that too much. So I always take the reed off first, and then take the mouthpiece off, and maybe blow out the spit a little bit. And you should have a swab. That's another item on the list of equipment you need. You want your swab to have a covered weight at one end and be nice and loose at the other end. Make sure that you don't have any knots in the string of it. Those can sometimes get stuck and cause issues. So sometimes I wipe a little bit of spit out of my mouthpiece. The other thing is, at least once a day, I'll swab it, but always swab the mouthpiece separately so you're not dropping the weight all the way through the clarinet, and just be really gentle when you're swabbing out the mouthpiece because the inside dimensions of it are important. So nice and gently swab out the mouthpiece, and you can swab out the rest of the clarinet and take it apart just like how we put it together, very carefully not to squeeze any keys too hard, and taking one piece apart at a time, putting it back in your case. And that should all be pretty simple. Great, so we're off to a good start. We have the clarinet put together. Next up, we're going to be learning how to actually play a note on the clarinet.